everybody. We have a new member today, this year, now. And so I just wanted to just kind of go around really fast. Drew Stevens from the town of Biltmore Forest, welcome. Sheila Franklin from Henderson County, welcome. Jay Egoff from Henderson County.
He's not here today.
Okay, not online either. Okay. And then Drew Ball from Buncombe County.
He's not able to join.
Okay. And then Emily Whitmire from the village of Flat Rock.
Oh, she's one patient.
We've had a run of flows as well. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over our ethics statement for MPO board members. This is a requirement at all MPO meetings. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflicts of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in a particular matter involved. And then also just a quick reminder, it's that time of year again where we need to fill out our ethics paperwork. We get like nice little reminders that there's some pretty big penalties if you do not do the paperwork. So just do it, log in, get done. And then move on. Is there any public comments?
I will note that we actually received a couple of public comments via some of the social media outreach that we've been doing. So just to share those quickly, we received one from Adrian Weir regarding our MTP, which is one of the items that we'll be talking about today. She noted in terms of vision, goals, and objectives, we are all interconnected: people, wildlife, rivers, forests. Geology, we must plan back, prepared for environmental events. We must understand how our planning decisions play a part in environmental events. We must make decisions collectively rather than individually, recognizing how each tweet can affect each other as neighbors. That was one comment we received. Another comment we received was regarding the Above the Mud race grant application with a comment noting that people felt that there should be more attention given to recovery resources and getting people back into their homes as opposed to pursuing a bicycle and pedestrian project.
We do have a quorum today, correct? Do we need to do roll call first before we get started?
We do not.
Okay, perfect. You all should have a copy of the agenda in front of you. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda and the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Asheville Cameroni.
Aye.
Drew, are you voting today?
Yes.
I voted
Bill?
yes.
Thanks, Tim. Biltmore Forest, Drew Stevens.
Here.
Black Mountain, Archie Portiller.
Here.
DOT Division 13, Billy Clark.
Here.
DOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
Here.
Canton, Dr. Ralph Hamlet.
Here.
Fletcher, Jim Player.
Here.
Henderson County, Sheila Franklin.
Here.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Here.
Mills River, Jeff Moore.
Aye.
Montreat, Tom Widmer.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris.
Aye.
Weaverville, Catherine Cordell.
Aye.
And Woodson, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
I assume all the hears turned it into ayes, right?
It was a slim vote.
You started a trend there, Madam Chair.
All right. So first up, the business is the Elevate 2050 vision goals and objectives for the MTP.
Okay, so I'll give a quick introduction on this item. Sorry, we have a very long consent agenda today. So the plan that we refer to as Elevate 2050 is the MPO's upcoming Metropolitan Transportation Plan. An easy way to think about it is local governments have their comprehensive plan. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan essentially serves as the comprehensive plan for the MPO and the region transportation plan. So it is a federally required plan, meaning that any transportation project that is going to receive federal funds or requires federal action is required to be reflected in this plan. This is a plan that looks out 25 years to the future, looks at what are our emerging needs around the region, and helps prioritize transportation projects based on this board's priorities, as well as the technical coordinating committee, as well as public outreach that's done as part of the plan. So this is a big effort that we have at the MPO, and so this is something that is being led by our prioritization subcommittee. To the members of that committee, thank you guys. We know we've had a lot of long discussions, and you've got about 8 months more of long discussions to go. But this is kind of the first item that has moved from the subcommittee up to the TCC and board, as we're looking for a preliminary approval of this to make sure that the vision, goals, and objectives are in line of where our board thinks it needs to go. So that is the first step. After that, we will be moving on to identifying potential projects and identifying needs, and then prioritizing projects later in the spring and summer. And so with that, I will turn it over to Joel Strickland, who is heading up our consultant team with McAdams. Joel, if you could take it away, it's all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Tristan. Thank y'all for letting me join you today. I'm glad to be here. As Tristan mentioned, we have been working on the vision, goals, and objectives for the 2050 MTP. And we started this process really before Hurricane Helene, and had it laid out pretty well. And then obviously some of the focus and some of the focus changed after the hurricane, and we realized we needed to make some adjustments to this. So we've worked very closely with the prioritization subcommittee on this. We've taken into account for public engagement and public feedback that we've received. And we've also taken into account for focus groups that we had with various groups throughout the urbanized area and received their input as well. So I will share my screen with you and show you what we have today.
You should be able to share now, Joel.
All right, thank you. Oop. Sorry, Tristan, I had it and then I lost it. Let me see if I can get it back up there. There we go. Okay, so the vision statement, and you can see it on your screen here, hopefully. The items in red are actually additions or changes that we made throughout the public engagement process, whether it was from feedback that we received from the general public and engagement activities that we did, or whether it was through feedback that we received through the various focus group meetings that we did that some of you may have taken part in, or feedback that we received from the prioritization subcommittee, or even the TCC last week. But the vision statement reads this way: the French Broad River MPO region envisions a resilient, equitable, connected, and well-maintained multimodal transportation system that reflects the unique character of the region and its terrain while getting all travelers and goods to their destinations safely, easily, and reliably. The system supports an inclusive, healthy, and economically vibrant region that aligns with land use goals and expands mobility choices. Obviously, post Helene, we wanted to make sure we got the resiliency piece in there. And then we also wanted to add that language that kind of made this vision statement more unique to the character and the unique terrain of the Asheville French Broad River area. And then getting into the actual goals and objectives, you can see those here. And the first goal listed there is to improve access and connectivity. And the overarching piece there is to support an efficient, reliable, and connected multimodal transportation system that equitably improves access to all activities for all users. We took out the little mobility piece there because it's addressed kind of later on under the capacity management and mobility goal. So that was the only piece that really evolved under that access and connectivity. And then you can see the objectives there to create a connected network of bike and pedestrian routes, enhance and expand transportation options and choices for all users, implement transportation facilities that are appropriate for intended adjacent land use, and support transit initiatives to improve service frequency, quality access, and reliability. So that was the first goal, to improve access and connectivity. The next goal there is to advance equity, and the overarching theme there is to promote equity and public participation throughout all stages of planning. So again, we want to promote equity throughout this whole entire process. And you can see the first objective there is to increase engagement with historically underrepresented and traditionally underserved groups in the planning process. 2B is to reduce harmful environmental, health, and safety effects of the transportation system on people in disadvantaged communities. 2C, invest in transportation options in disadvantaged communities to better meet residents' needs. And then 2D was an addition to invest in projects that reconnect and rebuild previously harmed, disadvantaged, or historically underserved communities. So, making those connections back to those types of communities and rebuilding and reconnecting those communities. The last one there on that side of the page is to promote sustainability, and then we've added in this resiliency piece here. So it's to promote sustainability and resiliency. The overarching theme: preserve, enhance the natural and human environment while creating a safe, secure, and more resilient and sustainable transportation network. The objectives there: to maximize investments to mitigate impacts of extreme weather on transportation infrastructure and reduce impacts of transportation projects and travel patterns on the environment; to plan, improve, and maintain facilities in a manner that supports context-sensitive design and promote a system that is compatible with community needs and the natural environment, incorporating resiliency measures in projects to the extent possible. 3C was to minimize effects of transportation projects on water quality, incorporating nature-based solutions to proactively address stormwater runoff. And then the last one there: reduce greenhouse gas emissions from mobile sources to continuously meet EPA air quality standards and increase utilization of other modes. So you can see there, this one was really reworked to make sure it addressed resiliency appropriately, and to make sure that transportation projects and transportation investments were really geared toward resiliency and sustainability. And then these last three goals over here on the right side of the page address capacity management and mobility. the overarching theme there, implement strategies that address congested roadway segments and increase roadway connectivity and regional mobility. You can see the objectives there, develop strategies that address system performance in congested segments, improve travel time reliability for all modes, and improve safe and efficient freight movement within and through the region. That one's pretty straightforward. As well as this next one, enhance safety, security, and system preservation. The overarching theme there, provide and maintain safer and more secure places to live, walk, bike, ride the bus, and drive. Obviously, this one's very important with the safety and security. Improve safety of travelers and residents, improve system resilience and security by reducing existing vulnerabilities and improving ability to achieve timely emergency response. Maintain current transportation network across all modes in a state of good repair. Minimize conflict between different modes of travel, reduce unsafe behaviors, and increase effectiveness and awareness. And then this last one, 5E, was an addition to maximize cost-efficient maintenance investments to improve system resilience and user safety. And again, that kind of ties into maintenance and repairs and investments that assist with safety, but also assist with resiliency. And then lastly, the last goal there is to foster economic vitality, with the overarching theme there being to develop a transportation system that supports a thriving, sustainable, broad-based economy while maintaining the surrounding area's character and expanding extra-regional travel, job access, and efficient movement of freight and goods. And the objectives there are to promote an adaptable transportation system that supports the local and regional economy and job growth and enhances economic prosperity. Invest in projects that enhance tourism and extra-regional travel. And then we kind of spelled out the modes here, which was a little bit of an addition, including aviation, bicycle, pedestrian, transit, safety, rail, and roadway projects. Improve job access for non-motorized users. And we give some examples there, bicyclists, pedestrians, and transit users. And then lastly, increase transportation connections between where people live and work, and where people work, to enhance the region's affordability as a place to live, work, and visit. So again, in summation, that was what we came to as the vision, goals, and the objectives of this 2050 MTP. We will use these to really help us with project development, with project selection, with project prioritization, and also in developing the methodology for project prioritization. So all of these will remain real focus points and real guiding points as we move forward throughout this process in addressing needs and making sure that projects that are selected to address these needs are in line with the goals and the vision of this plan, as spelled out by everyone that's had input on it. So I'm open to any questions that any of you may have. Again, this has been a several month process, starting out before Hurricane Helene, and then we had the chance to take this out to the public and get some feedback, take it to focus groups and get some feedback, and then we've shared it with the prioritization subcommittee and also the TCC for their feedback. So it's been evolving for a little bit of time now, so we're glad to get it before you today.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions?
If I can, the addition of the 2D piece to this seems really clearly intended to be about some set of projects. Is my perception right there, or what's driving that?
You said a subset of projects. Did I hear that right?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the projects that are being, thought would be specifically addressed by the addition of 2D.
Yeah, I don't know that at this point we as the consultants in this have a set of projects in mind. I think as we move further in this, as we look at the environmental justice analysis that has been taking place, I think if we identify projects that potentially could reconnect potential communities that have been historically underserved, I think that would be an opportunity to invest in those projects. But from our standpoint, we have not already identified a set of projects, no.
I got it answered, I just,
I can add to that. I would say that there are specific projects that would certainly fit in with that. You know, with the Above the Mud project that the city of Hendersonville is submitting, we worked with them actually previously on a grant for the Reconnecting Communities grant through federal highways. But to Joel's point, I think more generally, as part of the MTP, we're required to look at where are disadvantaged communities that may be negatively impacted by previous or future projects, and what can we do so that we aren't putting nothing but negative impacts into those communities? What can we do to mitigate that? So there's some things in mind, but to Joel's point, I think it's a more general objective.
my only other observation is that, you know, these, I'm strongly supportive of a planning process, but when the objectives here can oftentimes conflict with each other. And I mean, people just need to realize these are not a consistent set of objectives that are never going to conflict with another objective, you know, one objective leading to something different than one of the other objectives that are stated.
That's a great point, and honestly, that's something that comes up every time we do this, especially because the MTP is required to be fiscally constrained, meaning we have to have some idea of where funding is going to come from for the projects that are in the plan. And so I will just note, every time we do this, there are a number of goals and objectives related to improving transit, bicycle, and pedestrian modes. But the funding reality is that, you know, those modes especially
do not have money.
Don't have a ton of money. I mean, in all honesty, like addressing congestion, you know, Board Member McGrady and Board Member Clark can back me up on that. The funding situation has changed considerably, and it's going to be less about how do we make the perfect system. It's going to be more about how do we make the most important improvements that we can for all of these goals and objectives with what we have available. So great point. Councilmember Roney, you have your hand raised?
I do. Thank you for recognition. I have two areas to kind of repeat curiosity around. One is when we have neighborhoods like Burton Street and Hillcrest are going to be impacted by I-26. I think it's easy for us to imagine there's a part that's directly related to a DOT plan, but also I think about the other sides of those neighborhoods are also DOT roads. And so I wondered, what are we doing to kind of like map, not just like one project at a time, but more holistically? And I imagine that, hold on, there's some traffic noise on my commute. I imagine that my example is not unique to our neighborhoods. It's just probably felt across our region and our scope. A second area of curiosity I have around accessibility. So we know that we, in the city of Asheville, because of our GAP plan, we have some numbers around where our issues are with ADA compliance and accessibility. And if we had a bigger picture of maybe where those needs were for transportation and safety improvements across the region, then we could leverage for more funding and streamlined planning and funding for across our area.
Yeah.
So how does this help us get there?
No, those are both good points. And your point to safety, that will be part of our existing conditions report that we're working on and we're very close to completing. We'll obviously analyze the safety impacts and make sure that that's a very big piece of this, and included in that. Obviously, it's included in that enhanced safety, security, and system preservation goal. So safety will be a very big piece. And I'm trying to remember exactly what you asked in your first question, but as far as minimizing impacts on certain communities, I think you have to, when you're looking at a project that is dividing a community, I think you've got to look at other mechanisms to try to what's the word I'm looking for? I guess reduce the impacts and make for some other connections or some other ways to maintain some type of facilities that they can use to still have the abilities to get from one side to the other, and that they're not completely cut off. So
I'll give
you
a
know,
more a zoomed in example is like the Burton Street community seems to fit in to the scope of this work because it's an environmental justice designated neighborhood. But a lot of times we're only thinking about one side of the neighborhood and not the fact that it is sandwiched between DOT projects. So I guess my curiosity is, how does this fit into helping us get funding to be able to zoom out in a more holistic way instead of just project by project?
Oh, yeah, good point. So yeah, having the projects, obviously, having all the projects in the plan will obviously help you get funding. Having the background data for the communities, having the EJ analysis in here, will assist also with helping get support for those communities in the future. So, even if it's not those individual projects, the analysis, the EJ analysis that we do, showing that those communities are environmentally sensitive communities, environmentally sensitive areas, that analysis will be there to help secure funding for those communities for other opportunities in the future, whether it be through grant funds or through any other potential projects that may come in the future outside of this planning effort. So even beyond specific project by project, like you mentioned, the analysis that we'll do from the EJ standpoint, from the going back to the safety standpoint, like you said earlier, all that data will be documented for each of these communities on a more of a TAS census tract type level. So that'll be there for use going forward until the next MTP, and can be used to help secure funding for those communities.
Thank you, Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any more comments before we move on? We'll be talking about this a lot in the coming months, so if things pop up, just reach out to Tristan and Joel.
Yeah. One thing to quickly point out, especially for Councilmember Cordell, is the 5E was added as a result of the last prioritization committee's discussion. So we tried to make sure that we got that discussion to maximize cost-efficient maintenance investments as stated in the agenda. So just wanted to draw that to your attention.
Okay, next up is the UPW.
Well, we are looking for approval from this board at this point, because this is an important foundational pillar for this plan.
I'll make that motion to approve what you presented to us.
Second.
Okay, and we'll go through the roll call.
City of Asheville, Ken Roney.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Jerry Stevens.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Pateller.
Aye.
DOT Division 13, Billy Clark.
Aye.
BOT Division 14, Chuck Gray.
Aye.
Town of Canton, Ross Hamlet.
Aye.
Town of Fletcher, Jim Flair.
Aye.
Haywood County, Brandon Rogers. Henderson County, Sheila Franklin.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Jeff Moore.
Aye.
Lawn Street, Tom Widmer.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris.
Aye.
Weaverville, Catherine Cordell.
Aye.
Woodfin, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
Yeah, I got it.
Hey, this is Brandon Rogers. I'm an I too.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers.
Okay, now we can move on to the UPWP.
Okay, just as a little bit of background, the Unified Planning Work Program, we can't stop the acronym UPWP, or as our board chair calls it, the UPWIP. Serves essentially as the MPO's budget. Just as a reminder, the MPO is largely funded 80% through federal funds, that's MPO planning, or metropolitan planning funds, and 20% through local dues from the dues-paying member government of the MPO. This is, I will say, this is not the most, this doesn't tend to generate the most excitement, but it's an important document. And today we have the draft of the FY26 UPWP. We are looking for official approval today because the draft actually has considerable standing, especially with FTA, the Federal Transit Authority or Administration. Just to go through what we have in the draft UPWP today, one of the big things is no change in local dues. So we'll be keeping those flat through FY26. One of the things we do plan on having considerably more focus in FY26 compared to FY25 is much more work on data management. The 2050 MTP that we just discussed plans to be adopted in September. That means we start work on the 2055 MTP. And a big part of starting that work is pulling down all the land use in our region and making that a uniform data set. I won't go into it, but our GIS coordinator has quite the year ahead of her. And also pulling in population and employment data as part of that. That serves as the base for our region's travel demand model. Obviously, less of a focus on the 2050 MTP, which will be adopted early in FY26, we expect a draft STIP to come out next month, which serves essentially as the end of P 7.0, the seventh round of prioritization. That means we will be starting P 8.0, or at least we're scheduled to. And so we will be coordinating with this group and others on what projects we want to submit and prioritize as part of P 8.0 in FY26. Another thing I want to draw to people's attention is we are planning on having a call for planning projects. We're scheduling that for the fall. That'll go into the creation of our next UPWP. So things like corridor studies, small area plans. We've done a lot of feasibility studies with this work. We'll make funding available to our member governments to utilize that. We haven't in some time. If you've looked at the bottom of our agenda packets, there's a long list of active studies. That list is below double digits now, or I think will be very soon. Very exciting for us. And so number of active is going down. We want to make that list bigger again and make sure that the resources at the MPO are available to our member governments. But in your packet is the draft UPWP. We do have, backed by popular demand, a table of acronyms for folks to reference. We have a list of general funding that's available for use in the UPWP. We have a breakdown of our dues-paying members and what they are expected to pay. Just to make that clear, we have our key initiatives, kind of our higher level initiatives that are listed at the beginning, and then we get more into the specifics. So I won't go through all of this, but I will say that we are planning a number of updates and initiatives to keep us on track with our planning processes that are required, and also doing a number of things such as a call for planning project. We plan on looking at potential freight detour planning in the event of system or major route closures. So a lot of those details are listed in this part of the narrative. But as I noted before, one other thing is the special studies funded through the MPO or being managed by the MPO are listed, and those are the studies that we anticipate being active through FY26. But also, an important part of this is the narrative for use of what's called FTA Section 5303 funds. Those are metropolitan planning funds that come to the city of Asheville from FTA for metropolitan planning. So this part of the narrative shows what the city of Asheville plans to use their FTA metropolitan planning funds for in FY26. And so that is broken out in this document as well, and also shows the funding associated with those work tasks. As part of what we're looking for approval for today, there's in general is the draft Unified Planning Work Program for FY26. But there's actually two resolutions that are required at this time for that. One is the general approval of the document. The second is actually a specific resolution requested by NCDOT's Integrated Mobility Division that essentially serves as this board's sign-off on the FTA funding within this document. So, again, we are looking for an official approval from this board today. Are there any questions or comments?
Will they be in the form of two different motions then, or can we combine them?
In the past, we have combined them as one approval, but however this board would like to.
Can you state the motion you'd like to see put forward so that we get it right?
We are looking for a motion to approve the MPO's draft Unified Planning Work Program for FY26, including the required resolution that reflects its approval.
I make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
And we'll go through the roll.
I don't write down who made the motion, I forget.
Mr. McGrady made the motion and I seconded it.
Thank you.
We don't usually agree on the board.
I just want to make sure we include the up whoop in the motion.
City of Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Drew Stevens.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Pertiller.
Aye.
DOT Division 13.
Aye.
DOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
Aye.
Town of Canton, Dr. Ralph Hamlet.
Aye.
Town of Fletcher, Jim Player.
Aye.
Haywood County, Brandon Rogers.
Aye.
Henderson County, Sheila Franklin.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Mills River, Jeff Moore.
Aye.
Montreat, Tom Widmer.
Aye.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris.
Aye.
Weaverville, Catherine Cordell.
Aye.
Woodfin, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next up, item 4C is the 5310 JARC.
With that, I'll hand it off to Davey on our team.
Hey, Jennifer or Tristan, can you hear me? This is Brandon Rogers.
Loud and clear.
Okay, good deal. Kevin Inslee is also on the call, and I think they have him as a attendee instead of a panelist, if you don't mind to check that.
Absolutely.
Is he on the iPad?
You must be iPad too.
He probably is on his iPad.
All right. We've given you the offer for promotion, Commissioner Hensley. Apologies for that.
All right, today we just have a brief overview of the 5310 and JARC call for projects. This is the fiscal year 2024 release for projects, and at the end of the presentation, we'll be asking for your approval to let the call for projects. Just 1 second to adjust my screen so I can read my slides. So the 5310 pool of funding that comes from the Federal Transit Authority, or Federal Transit Administration, is intended to operate public transportation services that improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. And there's a bunch of different ways that can be done, but generally speaking, this is a program that's designed specifically for agencies to provide public transportation to seniors and individuals with disabilities that are not served by other modes currently. This year's allocation of 5310 funding is $477,562. 10% of that goes to administration fees, and so the remaining Section 5310 funding after that, those admin fees for this call of projects will be $429,806. JARC is another similar program from STA. JARC is serves as the Job Access Revert Commute Grant Program, and it's intended to fund the development and maintenance of transportation services designed to transport welfare recipients and eligible low-income individuals to and from job-related activities for their employment. And this pot of funding is a 10% set aside of MPO's 5307 funding. And so that pool of funding this year will come to $477,562. So far, our timeline, we're presenting this to you today in hopes for your approval. With your approval today, we would open up this call for applications. We would accept applications through February 20th of this year, and then we would bring it to the prioritization subcommittee to review those applications and score them on March the 5th. On March the 13th, all going according to plan, we would bring this to the PCC, their review and recommendation for your approval, and then it would come back before you on March the 20th for a final approval with the requisite TIP amendment coming before you on May the 15th. Just an important note for local governments, the funding circulars for both 5310 JARC and 5307 have changed as of September 2024, and so there are some slight differences, although the overall programs remain the same from last year's call for projects. Mostly what has changed is just administrative references. We do encourage everyone to review those materials. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
Councilmember Whitmer, you have your hand raised?
I do, Tristan. I noticed on the timetable that the announcement is on the 16th and the applications are due on the 20th. Does that give people enough time to complete, to notice it and to notice the notice and to complete the applications?
just to note, this was brought to the 5307 subrecipient work group. So we brought it to a lot of the folks who deal with transit and are likely to apply. And that timeline was approved by that group at that point. We realize it's a fast timeline, but we did hold off on this call for projects just to give folks a little more time to get through what they needed to get through last fall. This is typically held in the fall, so we have a tight timeline because of the delay.
Okay, I understand the administrative aspects of that, but I just wonder, are we really doing justice to those people who really want to submit project applications with just 4 days?
No, it's a month and 4 days.
You're right. My bad. Sorry. Never mind.
Okay. So do we have a motion to discuss this timeline?
I make a motion to move forward with this.
Thank you.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Councilmember McAllister.
And roll.
Asheville, Kim Rooney.
Aye.
Whitmore Fuller, Drew Stevens.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Pertiller.
Aye.
BOT Division 13, Billy Clark.
Aye.
BOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
Aye.
Canton, Dr. Ralph Hamlet.
Aye.
Fletcher, Jim Slayer.
Aye.
Haywood County.
Aye, this is Kevin Inslee. You can put me an eye on all of it if you like.
Kevin Inslee. Haywood County, Brendan Rogers.
Aye.
Henderson County, Sheila Franklin. Aye. Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Fanta.
Aye.
Mills River, Jeff Moore.
Aye.
Montreat, Tom Woodmer.
Aye, with a note that that's plenty of time for the application process.
Rural Transit, David White.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Larry Harris.
Aye.
Beaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. And Woodson, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Title VI plan update.
This is right back to Daisy, but I'll preface by saying this is one planning requirement of the MPO that was noted in our certification review as needing to be updated over the next 4 years. Daisy has been leading this effort at the MPO.
And I'm just going to be providing a brief overview of some of the work that we've been doing on our Title VI plan. Our current Title VI plan was updated in 2019, so this will hopefully be our 2025 update. And Title VI is a section of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that states that no person in the United States shall, on the grounds, give me 1 second to rearrange my screen, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin be excluded from participation and be denied the benefits of or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And while we refer to it as Title VI, it actually is an umbrella that includes the actual text of the Title VI from the Civil Rights Act, as well as some of the other titles, including Title VII, the Uniform Relocation and Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policy Act of 1970, an executive order involving environmental justice, an executive order involving individuals with limited English proficiency, the Americans with Disability Act, the Age Act of 1975, Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, and Section 23 of U.S. Code, Section 324, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and transportation system. But throughout this presentation, when we refer to Title VI, it will be encompassing all those different pieces of legislation and executive orders. The first executive order relative to environmental justice, loosely speaking, is intended to make sure that there are not disparate impacts on particular communities, some of which we've already had some discussion about during this meeting, but just making sure that impacts are appropriately spread throughout the community and we don't see any disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects on minority populations and low-income populations. Executive Order 13166 requires each federal agency that provides financial assistance to develop a limited English proficiency guidance for its recipient on the Title VI obligation to provide meaningful access to LAP individuals. And we'll be going into a little bit about what that means in just a moment. Just generally speaking, a recipient is anyone that receives any type of federal assistance from a federal agency. So as an MPO, Tristan was speaking about the UPWP, we receive 80% of that funding from federal agencies, and then a number of our programs are funded federally, so that puts us firmly within the requirements of Title VI as a subrecipient. What are we updating at this time? The Title VI plan requires periodic revisions to update information that changes as a result of the political, geographic, or demographic environment. It requires new analysis of federal requirements pertaining to the Title VI plan, including identification of new communities of concern, analysis of low English proficiency communities and linguistic concentrations across the MPO planning area, and assessment and identification of community groups that can aid in reaching LAP communities, the Spanish populations, and communities of concern. And that's one of the things that we'll get to in the end of this presentation that we'll be asking both members of our TCC and MPO board to help us with as we move forward. So generally speaking, when we look at limited English proficiency, we look at census data to try to understand concentrations of individuals that speak English very well across multiple language categories. This table shows that analysis, and then the, trying to think of what color I want to describe that as, but the orangish cells to show language categories where we had to do further analysis to find out if we were required to provide other translation services in the form of text or audible translation services in the form of individuals at meetings upon request. One thing that we ran into is when we did the 2019 update of the plan, the Census Bureau, through the American Community Survey, collected more information on language that was available down to the census block level. And that allowed us to do a more robust calculation of those language total categories. And so we were able to tell on a granular level with each language category whether an individual was considered LAP or not. Upon subsequent releases of census information, the results do not go down to the same level of detail. So we had to manually run some of that analysis, and in doing so, the particular population that came into question was individuals that speak Russian or other Slavic languages, because they're now all combined as a single language category. And so we had to be able to separate how many individuals spoke Russian as opposed to Ukrainian languages or Polish, to make sure that we did not have over 1,000 in any language category. And so we utilized the ratios in each language category that we had in 2015, and then we used that to extrapolate across population data into present day. The ultimate findings of that data is that we did not, other than Spanish-speaking individuals, qualify to have a LAP plan for any particular language category other than Spanish. We found that we had 721 individuals that speak Russian and speak English less than very well, and 717 that speak other Slavic languages and speak English less than very well. And this is just a graph of how that looks over time. Between 2015, when the analysis was last available, and today, you can see there's been quite a bit of change in the relative categories of each language. But overall, if we look at the number of individuals that speak only English, speak English very well, or speak English less than very well between 2015 and 2022, which was the last cross-section of data that we had available. It's still roughly the same. 3.3% of the population in 2015 spoke English less than very well, and 3.3% of the population in 2022 spoke English less than very well. For our timeline today, we engaged the Title VI Plan update in August of 2024. We've been digging into analysis of the census data. We went through those issues with data availability relative to LEP communities, and we're continuing to work through some analysis of communities of concern, kind of in tandem with our efforts on the NTP, as well as looking across other categories where we know we have concentrations of individuals that might be considered vulnerable for other demographic reasons. Future efforts over the next 2 months, we're going to be sending out a survey to MPO stakeholders, and really our ask for that is for you as members of the board, we want to know how well we've been doing with this plan since the last update, what changes you see that we could make improvements, any community groups that you know to be working with either vulnerable communities or communities that are considered LAP, and any geographic concentrations that you know of within your jurisdiction of either environmental justice stakeholders or individuals that speak English with limited proficiency. Moving forward, we're hoping to have a draft Title VI plan in front of you at the February TCC board cycle, and then we'll be offering this for TCC and board approval in March. So with that, are there any questions at this time?
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Okay, safety performance targets.
Okay, I'll give a quick introduction. Today we have Brian Murphy from NCDOT Safety Unit to talk to us about safety performance targets. This is something that's required to be done on an annual basis. And I will just note this is something that historically has generated a whole lot of discussion, and rightfully so. Just to point out, today this is an informational item. Next month, this is an action item. And so we've asked Brian to join us to talk about how we do performance measures and targets, how things are looking, what are the targets that are being proposed by NCDOT. And so I am encouraging everyone to ask Brian as many questions as you can or want or whatever. But just one last note is that the last time we went over these safety performance targets, we approved the state's targets, but we added on a note that this board would like to see NCDOT develop, I think what we call more realistic targets in the future. Because as you'll see in Brian's presentation, the trend lines for what's happening are not going the way that we want to go, and the targets are, I think it's fair to call them aggressive. And so in coordination with NCDOT after that, one thing they noted is that the MPO's safety action plan that is ongoing, there will be an update next month, would be an ideal venue to determine potential alternative targets. So that's what happened last year, but I'll stop talking. Brian, please take it away, and please update this group on the targets for this year.
All right, yeah, thanks, Tristan. Trust you can see my screen. Please let me know if not. Yeah, Tristan mentioned I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of the data trends in your area. I'm going to talk primarily on safety performance measures since that's the specific issue at hand, and then kind of close out just by making you aware of some of the safety data resources that might be available. But again, I do appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit today about about some of these important items. So there'll be a lot more information in the packet that Tristan distributes after the meeting today. They'll have a lot of statewide data trends and even more trends at your specific MPO level. But in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this part fairly brief today, but be happy to take any questions that you might have towards the end here. So what do some of these the trends look like in your specific MPO boundary? I'll spend just an extra second on this slide here because they're all set up similarly afterwards. The next few slides are going to be trends in either traffic safety data measurables or some of those metrics that inform, such as VMT. And so the orange trends you see on the screen there, those will be the statewide trends. And then the blue line represents the trends at your specific or your specific MPO area. So first metric here that helps to explain some of these trends are vehicle miles traveled. So it's a good measure of motor vehicle activity on our system. However, it's not a perfect measure. It only measures motor vehicle activity. It does not measure non-motorist travel, pedestrian and bicycle movements and such. But as you see here in your MPO, those trends are tracking very closely with the state. The things to point out here with this VMT is that you see pretty steady growth up until the COVID and pandemic stay-at-home orders, and then you saw a pretty steep decline for that year, and then we've been pretty steadily increasing back to about where we were pre-COVID metrics at this point. One of the metrics we do look at from a safety perspective is just simply the number of reported crashes. So these would be those that involve property damage only or a personal injury, and this would be on all public roads in North Carolina, so not just those that are owned by the state. A couple of things to point out here is that reported crashes typically trends pretty closely with VMT. So obviously the more or less activity that you have on your roadway system, more or less opportunity that you have for crashes. And so other thing to point out here is just the sheer number of these. So if you look at those numbers, about over 300,000 crashes per year at the state level, there's obviously a lot of public resources that are involved in responding to those events. If you look at the number of crashes here in your MPO boundary, so about 13,000 or so in the most recent count. So a lot of these events, again, they do take a lot of public service time, obviously, to respond and to react to these. Fatalities is probably the key metric that we look at in traffic safety. As Tristan had already mentioned, there's not a lot of great news on most of these slides, and that the trends are increasing. And you certainly see that here on this graph, and you see that those numbers increased, particularly at the state level during COVID. And so that was something that was a bit unexpected. But this is not just a North Carolina trend. This is something that was seen throughout the nation, where you did see a pretty sharp increase there in fatalities, and they still have not gone down to what they were pre-COVID. And then the other thing here to point out is just the number of these within your MPO boundary. So between 45 and 70 fatalities per year within your MPO region. Serious injuries is another key metric that we look at from a safety perspective. This graph looks a little weird just because there's a definition change in what officers use to determine a serious injury crash in 2016, but you certainly see rising numbers here if you're looking at a long-term trend, certainly both at the state level and the MPO level as well. Non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, this is primarily bicycle and pedestrian. This is another area of growth in the state, and this is a national trend as well. And if you look over time, you certainly see an increase within your MPO boundary as well. These numbers tend to bounce around a little bit more just because they get smaller as we drill down to your MPO level, but certainly an increasing trend if we're looking at those over time as well. So 15 to 30 of these non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries within your MPO region each year. And then I'll close the trend part of this talk just on unbelted fatalities and serious injuries. This is one that's, to me, it kind of highlights the complexity around traffic safety. Obviously, in these types of meetings, we talk a lot about traffic safety in terms of infrastructure improvements, and that's certainly a huge part of it. But there's also, it's complicated, right? There's certainly a behavioral component as well. And when you see these numbers of unbelted fatalities and serious injuries that have, more than doubled at the state level in the last 10 years, and nearly the same frequency increase at your MPO level as well, it's concerning. And so this is one, again, that we've seen a lot of growth in, or a lot of increase here in the rate of these types of events. Last one here, I'll just kind of close on this as far as from the data perspective, but this just kind of shows kind of where crashes are occurring at within your MPO boundary grouped by municipality. And you'll notice that next to last line there shows the number that occurred in rural areas. So in this sense, it just means outside of an incorporated municipality. And I'll show it toward the end here some maybe some easier ways to look at this type of information as well. So do want to kind of switch gears a little bit here and talk about safety performance measures. Obviously, that's the issue at hand, as Tristan described. First, get into kind of why we do these. So these are a requirement by federal highways as of federal transportation legislation back in 2016. And so it does require state DOTs and MPOs to set targets for the 5 safety target areas you see on your screen there. And those are number and rate of fatalities, number and rate of serious injuries, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. FHW does prescribe how they want to see those targets, reported back to them so that they have consistency across the states. And so those numbers are based on 5-year rolling averages. The targets are for calendar years, and as many of you know, this is an exercise that we go through annually. So when do we report these targets? So the state has to report by the end of August, MPOs by February 27th, which is 180 days after the state reports. And how are the targets set? And that's where we do have some flexibility. So that's up to each state how they want to determine that, and MPO. So the MPO can certainly do a different methodology than the state. The way the legislation's written, it's just that we have to work together if an MPO adopts a different methodology. And as Tristan mentioned, kudos to you all for going through with the safety action plan. That's a good opportunity to think about what you might want your targets to look like at your MPO, at your specific MPO level, and that's a good opportunity to, again, just think about those and how that might reflect your MPO's values and culture, and I think those are more meaningful really when you do have specific local metrics. So how do we set those metrics at the state level? Well, it relates back to our strategic highway safety plan. So this plan is it's a visionary document at the state level that really kind of outlines how we'll tackle traffic safety issues. There's a wide stakeholder group that's involved in putting these together. Municipality representation, MPO, RPO representation. So there's a lot of voices that kind of go into this plan. And with the last plan that was adopted in 2024, the goal that was set was to reduce all fatalities and serious injuries by half by 2035, moving towards 0 by 2050. And as Tristan correctly mentioned, that is a very aggressive target, certainly considering kind of how our numbers are currently trending. So how do we actually come up with the target values? So we know where we are in our baseline year. In this case, it's 2019. We know where we want to be based on that goal I just mentioned from our strategic highway safety plan, which is to reduce that number by half by 2035. And so we can do math to tell us if we're making steady progress, where should we be along that line in order to meet that goal. And that's essentially how we come up with those targets at the state level. So we are assessed at the state level as by federal highways as to whether we met or make significant progress towards those targets. That last assessment took place last year in early spring of 2024, and that was on our 2022 calendar year targets. Again, the reminder, the MPO is not directly assessed by federal highways, but obviously if the state's going to meet our targets, we've all kind of got to be going in the same direction there. So based on FHWA's last review, North Carolina did not meet or make significant progress towards achieving its performance targets. Those numbers there on the screen, they're also, will be in your packet. Again, your MPO is not assessed, but if you were, this is what those numbers would look like. And again, this will be in your packet, but no targets were achieved and no numbers were better than baseline, which just simply means that we're on an increasing trend. So again, in your packet, there's a lot of information. Safety is a pretty data-rich environment, and so there'll be a lot of information in your packet about what these five safety metrics look like over time. And there's a lot of information online, which I'll jump to next. So again, in your packet, there'll be links to a ton of safety data resources. I'll just hit on a couple of these just in the interest of time, just to give you a flavor of kind of what these might look like. So all of our safety projects, all our projects that we fund with safety specific monies, so that could be our state spot safety program, which is $12 million per year, or our federal HSIP funds, which is a little less than $80 million a year. Those are all mapped and geolocated, and you can click on any specific project and get more information about that, about what that project intends to accomplish, and then things, like the cost, is it funded in design? Is it one that's completed? All that type of information is available on public facing website. The other one I wanted to highlight is our non-motorist crash data dashboard. This is one that we recently revamped during the last couple of months. But this will allow you to select your boundary, the years of interest for you. So you can, select a specific MPO boundary, and when you do that, all the numbers are around the screen will update, and you can see similar trend lines as well. So you can select really any boundary that's out there. So an MPO boundary, a division, county, municipality. There's a lot of self-service there that's available. And with these maps as well, all the pedestrian and bicycle crashes are geolocated, and so you can click on an individual crash if you're interested in seeing more information about that specific event. And there's a lot of kind of a type coding and contributing circumstance type coding that's available with each one of those. So I think with that, Tristan, I'll be happy to take any questions that the group might have.
Councilmember Roney, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I have this right. Can you remind us where that crash data, I guess, dashboard is housed, or where a member of the public might find it?
Yeah, sure. And all these are on our traffic safety website. So I'll send these out. These will all be links in the information that Tristan provides after the meeting today. But the easiest way is to Google NCDOT traffic safety. That'll take you to our main page. You'll see a tile there for safety data mapping. And there's tons of those maps kind of listed out there. If there's anything specific that you're looking for and need a direct link, I'll be happy to provide that as well.
Thank you, and thanks for putting that in the chat.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
I was going to I think I was the one that had a problem with these goals because we keep setting goals that we don't meet.
Right.
They're not at all realistic in terms of, I guess they could be called aspirations, and with the hope that we get there, but I just don't see any realistic possibility that we're going to either our area or the state is going to meet the goals that we set out.
Yeah, and you weren't alone. I believe you introduced that motion, and that passed with a majority last year. Brian, one question I think just to highlight. In the past, when we've talked about MPOs setting their own targets, we've been told that is likely going to result in one staff person basically entire time. But my understanding is that's somewhat changed. So can you talk about some of the staff resources that would be required if MPOs set their own targets?
Yeah, and I really don't see there being a lot of resources required for you setting your own targets. The crash data we're committed to providing. So as long as those metrics are things that we have access to, we'll provide you the crash data. The other component of the rates or yeah, the component of the measures are the rates there. And so you need, vehicular or VMT data by MPO. That's also information that the department's committed to providing each year. I don't see it being a heavy lift. I think the heavy lift is really kind of going through that process of determining what you want your metrics, what you want your targets to be. And as you mentioned, since you guys are kind of in the middle of the safety action plan, that's a good opportunity to have those conversations with a wide base. And so that's something, I would certainly encourage you all to do through that process. And at the state level, yeah, we're committed to working with you. I think, I don't see there being a whole lot of, as long as the data is available, I don't see there being a lot of heavy lift and kind of the annual maintenance of refreshing those targets each year. I think the work is really just in getting kind of consensus at your MPO level of what you want those targets to look like.
But it doesn't really matter what the goal is as much as it does how you plan on getting to that. So, because I mean, we had an hour-long conversation last year about it, and we finally just decided to go with whatever the state suggested. But it still goes back to, how do you improve? Because if you don't ever improve, it keeps going up. It hasn't went down the whole time we sit here.
There have been some ebbs and flows, to point out, but the general trend has not been great. And yeah, I think that is a great point. Brian knows I'm on the statewide prioritization work group, and something to bring up at the beginning of every work group is that we need to do a better job of tying these targets to our investment decisions, which is much easier said than done. But yeah, this is to Brian's point, this is a complicated matter. Brian and his group have funds, I would argue, and Brian can highlight, not a ton of funds, but a set of funds that help with safety countermeasures and standalone safety projects. But there are other things that go into crashes that are not just infrastructure related. And I think that's where this becomes a very complicated matter. And, oftentimes we're told as MPO staff, focus on where the crashes are, let's get more projects there. And I have to ask people to pump the brakes, that just because there's a lot of crashes doesn't mean that's where there's the most risk. And so this is a very interesting and complex field. There's a lot of advancements going on right now. Brian's group has worked on moving from crash histories to data that is based on risk factors. So they maintain a statewide layer for bicycle and pedestrian risk, which is awesome. Thank you, Brian. Our safety plan is doing the same for not just bicycle and pedestrian, but all nodes, to look at risk rather than just looking at crashes. But again, beyond that, there's things like education and enforcement that are a big part of crash avoidance.
Tristan, I think if you go back and look at some of those trend graphs, so I was telling Sheila a minute ago, retiring from that law enforcement field, where you see the split and the rise, is just about the time from a national standpoint the negative outlook on law enforcement took place. So when you look at enforcement, I think every jurisdiction here had trouble for a long time finding officers to recruit in. Low numbers, low manpower, less enforcement. And I think that's still true in a lot of agencies around, that it's starting to come back, but it's slow. And so from an MPO standpoint, how do we affect that aspect, which to me, you can do all the access control you want, because I've done the job for years. You can do all the access control, all the signage and everything you want, but if you don't have the enforcement numbers there to mitigate the traffic violations, I don't know that you're gonna be able to do a whole lot of good, positive progress towards mitigating those numbers. I don't know how everybody else feels. And like I said, every jurisdiction has dealt with it to some degree or another, reduced staffing, so.
Now, you can have the best infrastructure ever if you don't have someone that's enforcing, running those stop signs, running those red lights, which is probably one of our biggest issues in Fletcher. You're always gonna have the trend upward, which is a shame. Not to mention elderly on the road and people on their phones all the time, so.
And then you throw the
Those are
storm in the middle of it.
uncontrollable values.
Yep.
I'd be actually curious too, just like when you break the data down for the actual cause of the accident, like is it related to polypharmacy? Is it related to, distracted driving? Like things obviously that infrastructure improvements don't correct. Impaired drivers through polypharmacy, and I know we have a lot of that in Hendersonville because we have a very aging community who are on a lot of medications too, and that impairs your ability to drive, it impairs your reflexes, and so, there's a lot of different data points I feel like we could get really in the weeds on, but would probably be helpful in the great scheme of it, trying to troubleshoot.
Agreed.
We just had another incident out our way where people get on the exit ramp going in the wrong direction. Fatal, I can count at least 4 in my head that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years in that same general area. And I wonder how it breaks it out if the fatal ones are broken out by a category, like you said.
Yes, and they certainly are. And I believe I heard the comment about wrong way driving, and that's something that that's a really tricky one too. They're relatively rare, but when they happen, they're obviously very severe. You got somebody going the wrong way down a freeway. You got high speeds involved going opposite directions. Those tend to not have a great outcome, as you mentioned there. So we do have a pilot study now that we're looking at a few different sections of freeway. The first one is the Beltline in Raleigh. To learn more about what types of treatments might be appropriate. Typically, those treatments are relatively expensive when you think about the scale of the number of interchanges that you'd have to treat, because they're typically not concentrated at one interchange. So you really got to have more of a systemic type treatment, which again kind of goes back to the conversation about the complexity of these events. So yeah, that is something that the crash data is very detailed. Again, it's a very data rich area, so we can dig down pretty deeply to anything that the officer really writes on the crash report. We can query back out and try to make some sense of it from a pattern perspective.
I know that this has been brought up before, at least I think I've talked to Tristan about it. A lot of the roads in the county and rural parts of our counties the markings are very difficult to see, specifically at night. And like in some places, they do use reflective paint, and there was a reason I feel like somebody said that they couldn't use reflective paint. But I've had, residents of Henderson County reach out to me asking about reflective paint just to help demarcate the lanes better on some of the rural roads.
Yeah, and the division may want to speak more to that. I know in our area, we are funding more long life pavement markings, which do have that reflective characteristic that you mentioned on the roads that typically wouldn't get those treatments based on traffic volume. And so, we're providing some of the seed money in safety funds to help with more of that. And then the commitment from the department is, as those roads are resurfaced, that they'll continue, that they'll have that reflectivity paint put back ongoing. So you will likely see more of that as time goes on. But yeah, it's a good point. And when it's wet and dark, obviously there's, you've got kind of a compounding issue there too. Unfortunately, nobody has invented a pavement marking that really works well in dark, wet conditions.
And so how is that something that we, like individual communities, can advocate for more of that? Like, what, do we need to speak to our actual district engineers? or what's the best way for us to do that?
Yeah, and you can certainly work through your division on those routes that you have specific concerns about, and they'll engage our unit. So we do have, in the traffic safety unit, we do have 8 offices across the state, but they're very linked in with the division on a day-to-day basis. But those are the types of things that they would investigate and potentially make a recommendation on.
Thank you. Any more questions? And then this will be coming back up again in February.
Correct. We have the deadline for adoption of targets at the end of February.
I assume with all the work that you and your staff have, it's not realistic for us to come up with our own here.
You know, I love playing with graphs and spreadsheets as much as anyone, so, I mean...
No, more than anyone.
I think that, you know, I will say we can offer a rudimentary alternative. I will emphasize rudimentary. But next month we'll also have an update on our safety action plan that's ongoing. So we'll have some more follow-up. I'll follow up with Brian and Federal Highways to maybe get some help on a rudimentary alternative, and we can follow up on the discussion.
I think that comes back to the point you made in terms of, you know, how do you, what goes on top of the goal to make sure that you have some process for meeting whatever the goal is that you set. I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, I could set a goal to lose 20 pounds, but if I keep eating the way I'm eating, I have to have an action plan.
I would like to just add, if whatever targets we got, whatever goals we got, I'd like to include at least anecdotally or request for further enforcement, as Mr. Moore said. I mean, one thing I do is remember the DOT board is drive back and forth across North Carolina a lot, and I drive a lot to work too, and it's an epidemic out there. You really have to be the defensive driver these days. And there are people who just completely ignore speed limits and signs and red lights, and it's just really started in COVID. It's gotten worse, I think. And I know there's very little we can do about this as this MPO, but it'd be nice just to include some statement in our adoption if we can. Just saying, you know, we think enforcement is a key component of this, and we would encourage that to be more.
I'm curious too about the actual time spent for our law enforcement. So what I hear from a lot of law enforcement is that they spend so much time running calls that, like, are they spread thin on actually doing this type of stuff as well? And I know something that I've actually spoken to some retired officers about is having a patrol division that is retired officers who basically fill the gap and help kind of take some of the load off of our regular law enforcement on things that they could be doing, they could be spending their time doing, whereas, and I don't even know if they have to be sworn. I think there's some weird stuff with that, but they can, you know, go to accidents, they can do the paperwork, they can wait for tow trucks, that kind of stuff, and then that allows our police officers to still do the rest of their work because they're spending so much time at accidents and those types of calls because we have so many of them and so I don't know if those are things that we could talk about, kind of helping to.
One thing, and this is more of a state legislative issue, I believe, is that when an officer writes a ticket, that money does not go to the department. It goes to the school system. We love the school system, and that's good. I'm not saying anything about that. But when I worked in traffic at the city, people would call me all the time and say, well, why don't y'all just use this ticket money and buy another patrol car? You know, use that to get more enforcement. But you can't. So the incentive is very intensive to do traffic enforcement. It takes a lot of resources, but it's not paid for. So.
I will just go very quick rant. I think that's a great point about the local resources required to, you know, react to these crashes. And, you know, something I want to note that is a bigger picture thing for us to think about is that a lot of the safety countermeasures, especially within infrastructure, are not popular. Adding medians to roads, Steve, has anyone clamored and requested medians? I mean, in a lot of projects, when those are being introduced, we know they reduce severe crashes. We know they reduce crashes. They don't get rid of them, they reduce them. But a lot of people feel that those types of countermeasures are there to stop that or to make left turns hard. I don't see that as a project goal. And so I think that's something that, especially as local leaders, I will just note, we have seen a lot of projects where safety countermeasures tend to be things that get put on the chopping block because there's so much pushback and there is just a lot of misunderstanding of what those things are there for. The other thing I'll note is that a lot of the safety countermeasures, as they're applied to SIP and SIP projects, tend to be quite large. Steve has heard this ran 100 times. Sometimes we don't need the greatest of countermeasures. Sometimes just having a little bit of that reduction in crashes that might not fit those NCDOT standards is something I would love for us to work towards. And specifically, NCDOT standard for urban medians is 17.5 feet. And with our 5-lane roads, we know that's going to require additional right-of-way, but there are cases where there's 12 feet or even less for a median. It doesn't do as much. There's problems at intersections with those, but it does something. The last thing I'll note is I really want to thank Brian. Brian's group, fantastic to work with. It's really hard for folks to realize. I didn't realize until Federal Highways sent me to another state to help out with something. NCDOT data is awesome. It is so good, and a lot of the efforts they're pushing are so good in advancing things to help make things better for decision makers and anyone working in transportation. So I just want to give Brian a thank you.
All right. Let's move on. I-40 and Chimney Rock State.
And with us today is Brian Birch. Brian he was formerly the division engineer at Division 14. I meant to look it up beforehand. Get the title, Engineer of the West. He was promoted to oversee a lot of the divisions in the West, and has since sadly moved on to the private side. But Brian has, you've worked virtually your entire career in Western North Carolina and is now working on some of the biggest recovery projects in our region. Brian, please take it away.
Thanks, Tristan. It's good to be back to the MPO and see some familiar faces and new faces. As Tristan said, Brian Birch, formerly of DOT, been retired about 3 years, and back now supporting Divisions 13 and 14 in the Hurricane Helene recovery efforts, working specifically on I-40 and 2 of the projects on US 74A in Henderson and Rutherford counties. Tristan, go to the next slide. I'll try to catch us up some. So just looking here on I-40, it's a CMGC project, some of the goals. Certainly we wanted to establish the temporary two-way traffic in the westbound lanes. That's still something that we're striving to do. We had that we were trying to achieve by the first of the year. Unfortunately, one of the rain events prevented that. We lost some more of the field slopes and compromised some of those lanes. And so we're having to do those repairs now with, again, the target of opening that up as soon as we feel like it's safe to do so. Our target is to complete those repairs within 2 years. certainly position the department to maximize the reimbursements from federal highways. This is a federal aid route, 74A is a federal aid route. So where we will get that reimbursement is from Federal Highway Administration. Working closely with external stakeholders in the gorge, you have certainly the U.S. Forest Service that owns most all of the property where this occurred, and then you have a small section where Duke Power owns some property. So we're working with them, and then communicating with our stakeholders, public and local governments, things like coming to this meeting here. Part of our goal is to let people know what we're trying to do, our schedules to do that, and keep you informed of that. Next slide, Tristan. Here's a map showing the location of the I-40 project, CMGC project. It's essentially the first 5 miles coming from Tennessee and going east, just through the double tunnels down there, if you're familiar with the gorge. We've had multiple events down through this area in the last 30 years with either hurricanes, Francis and Ivan back in 2004, the Tropical Storm Fred back in 21, and then multiple rock slides. The last big one was in 2009, and we had another one in 2018. So it's an area that's experienced a lot of disasters. So it's one that we're very familiar with for those of us who've worked in this area for a long time. Next slide, Tristan. So I mentioned the temporary traffic pattern that we're trying to get to. I should have turned around that typical section there in the top right-hand corner. What our goal is to put traffic in those westbound lanes. So if you're looking at the picture there on the left, it's those 2 lanes on the right. You can see that median wall and then an outside barrier. You've got about 36 feet there to put these lanes in. So we're looking at 2 11-foot lanes and a 12-foot shoulder. The reason I'd like to spin that typical around, that 12-foot shoulder is close to that median wall. So on the river side, that's there. Some, ideally, you'd say it's there for traffic if you have a breakdown, and certainly that's the case, but it's really there for safety. The geotechnical engineer said we need more space between the failures and where traffic's going to run, specifically tractor trailers and heavy loads. So we had to put that 12-foot shoulder in there for safety to the traveling public, and you can see the shoulders and how close it is to that outside barrier wall. You only have a couple of feet. So that's the goal that we're working towards. Kind of those 2 pictures down in the bottom. You have the Unicoi delineator. It's a concrete little berm that goes down essentially the double yellow line with some tubular markers on top of it. That is a positive barrier that has to be there according to the MUTCD. If something Federal Highway said you've got to put something out there to keep traffic separated. That's in Tennessee. The picture you see there is from Tennessee. It's also in on the North Carolina side. Most everything is done and ready for this traffic except for setting up those field slopes that had failed. So that's, again, something we're moving towards. Next, Tristan. We've got a contract ongoing now, and you can see those activities in that picture. Wright Brothers and their subs are out there putting in soil nails and anchors, trying to keep from that fill slope from continuing to fail and compromising additional lanes, and certainly the westbound lanes. We also have a CMGC contract. CMGC is Construction Manager General Contractor, another acronym. Ames Construction is that CMGC. The design firm is RK&K. So they're paired up. We put them together and said, let's come up with a plan, let's come up with solutions, let's cost that out, get some prices. The ICE, the independent cost estimator, is HNTV, same company that I work for. We'll work together to agree on prices and reconcile, and then we'll do a contract and let Ames go to work. Right now, we're estimating that cost somewhere between $750 million and $1 billion. As we kind of tone in and drill down into this, we'll have better estimates, but that's where we are right now. That contract was let the end of October, and as of today, we're hoping to get started on those repairs by Ames February the 6th, so just a few weeks away. And again, the estimated completion date being October of 2026, so 2 years from when the storm occurred. Next slide. You can see here, this is a diagram that was presented by, or made by Ames. This is all one site. So Federal Highway says you can only repair what's been damaged. You break those into sites. And that's what you put back, and that's what you get reimbursed for. But you can see here, the entire 5 miles essentially has damage. The only 2 gaps in that, there's a wall there between 2 of those polygons that somehow made it. And it was one of those that was field engineered. We took Jersey barriers and stacked them together and made a massive wall. It lasted, and then of course the double tunnels. Right there, we did not have any damage to the tunnels, but there's a road, we call it the runaround road, that runs around the tunnels. It was damaged and has to be rebuilt as well. So you can see, we've got damage all the way through this 5 mile area. It's one site for Federal Highways. We have a lot of extreme failures. This is very complicated and difficult area to construct back. Next slide. Here you can see a drone footage kind of during the event or not long after the event. You can see the amount of water that was flowing down through there. They calculated that. They were looking at probably 1,000 to 2,000 year storm, somewhere close to 69,000 CFS. This week they were saying they've kind of rerun some models that may be 73,000 CFS. A lot of water, no matter how you calculate it, right? The next slide kind of shows the condition of the river today. Again, you can see that river has moved. It's underneath our slopes. You can see all the damage to the slopes there. So essentially our contractor will come in and build a causeway all the way up through the river channel so that they can work and reconstruct this area from the bottom up. So they're going to be working from that causeway rather than working on top in the I-40 area or in the lanes. Next slide. So here's some of our solutions that we're looking at. We talked about roller compacted concrete yesterday in one of our calls. It's essentially like building a dam. You can see it in the top right corner. You just start placing concrete, cement, and just rolling it in. Essentially, you just make a massive dam there to protect your road. So we're looking at that. We're looking at secant walls. That's in the bottom right-hand corner. Those are just piles that are driven so close together that they essentially interlock and water can't infiltrate. Then you have the soldier pile wall in the top left. That's kind of the walls that we've used in the past. They didn't perform so well. They're not as resilient as those other 2. And then certainly you have in the bottom there the Teco mesh riprap buttress. Don't really see that we'll be using that along this corridor. We may have some places right at the Tennessee line where we do something like that. We're trying to get something more resilient. It was essentially you had a water event, but it was all of the debris that's in the water that's scoured out. We had built back in 2004. We had built walls. We had placed the rock as big as we could at the bottom of those walls to try to protect them. We had wrapped them in the high strength of mesh that we could find, steel mesh, and it blew that out as if it was not even there. I mean, it's just down through the river channel now. So we know that we can't put back any larger size material. We've already tried that. So now we've got to anchor it somehow, protect the bottom of those walls and protect the upstream sides of those walls to where water can't get in behind them and compromise them. So protect those weak points. And ideally, we're going to construct a facility back that can withstand the next major storm event. We're really looking at putting something back that will withstand the storm that we just had. And so we're looking at flow rates. We're looking at energy flow rates, which is not just the amount of water, but what's in the water and the waves that creates, and building something that will withstand that. So next slide, Tristan. Certainly we have a lot of goals and challenges. One is the accelerated project schedule, trying to get this completed within that 2-year time frame. building something more resilient. We've got to work with federal highways on that. You know, most of the time you put it back, we design to certain storms, we get reimbursed for that. Well, if you go beyond what your design standards are, those are betterments. Federal Highway says we don't pay for betterments, but they have given us some guidance that we can put back things that are more resilient. We just have to be able to justify it and show them how it's going to save ER dollars down the road. And we can do that because we've had 3 of these events now in the last 20 years. Construction access, trying to get down into this river channel is going to be an issue, building that causeway and having a causeway that can withstand just your routine storms, right? Just your 5-year storms, your 2-year storms, something where they can continue to work during the next 2 years. Environmental conditions, we're working closely again with the Forest Service, the Army Corps. They've been great partners. Can't say enough good things about them, and certainly federal highways. But again, we've got to work with them, get our permits, get our documents done, and make sure that we're doing things that they agree with. Traffic restoration, you know, having traffic in this gorge while we're trying to build it back certainly creates issues. Certainly if we start having additional failures or anything like that. And in the river relocation, you know, what do we do with the river? Where do we put it? And how do we put it to where it's not going to create issues in the future for the road? And we don't have a lot of room to work with here, right? So those are things that we're working on. Next slide. Chimney Rock. Chimney Rock is a progressive design bill.
You've got a quick question.
Oh,
Could I just ask a question before you go on to Chimney Rock? The causeway, is that literally a road down in the river, parallel to the river?
Yes.
And about how high off average water?
They're trying to get it 10 feet above the normal flow. That's what they're trying to do. It'll be 24 feet wide and on the top, and then you'll have slopes out from that, so it's going to be close to 40 feet.
And will it be taken out after the repairs are done?
We don't know yet. We've had discussions with the Forest Service and also with the Safe Passage Coalition. We're concerned with wildlife migration in this area. There's been some consideration that, hey, if we leave some of that, it could be a path for migration of elk and bear and other animals down in that area. Right now, a lot of them try to cross I-40. It's not safe to do so. So that's something that's being considered, but nothing final yet on that.
Mayor McAllister, you have your hand raised?
I do, and pardon me if this is a ridiculously naive question, but I get asked regularly, was any thought given to the possibility of selecting a new route and getting away from this river gorge?
No.
Okay.
Not by me and the team that I'm working with. Now, we did look at some options. You know, and I say, look, it was, let's just consider and see how, you know, what the cost would be, rough cost. So we looked at tunneling this entire 5 miles. We looked at viaducts for this entire 5 miles. And, you know, either the cost or the time, or for the viaduct, the kind of the fracture critical nature of it, you're trying to protect bridge members instead of having a mass out there. We felt like trying to put something back that's a wall essentially was the best option. The quickest, cheapest, best option.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, I think the viaduct was going to be one of my questions, but I also had another question. I assume, Brian, we have folks down there working around the clock trying to get that temporary section opened up on the westbound side?
They're working down there. I would not say around the clock just because of the weather right now. It's making it very difficult for them to work nights with, you know, sub-freezing temperatures and the ice. But they are working. They work through the holidays. Again, we would have had this open had we not have had those failures. I think it was December the 18th or 19th we had a rain event that created some additional failures. We're monitoring all of that now. You know, we've been monitoring all of that, but, yeah, they're doing the best they can, Commissioner Rogers, to get this open as quickly as they can and make sure that it's safe for the traveling public.
Okay, well, thank you. I just, I think we all know how critical that section of roadway is to our whole region. So I just want to keep doing all we could. If we need to try to get some incentives put in place or what we need to do to make sure that we're doing all we can. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, Brian, can I say something? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Brian, I just want to thank you guys for all the work you're doing. I've got to sign off here in just a minute. I got an appointment, but I just want to thank you all for all that you're doing. And, you know, I've really hit all our elected officials that, you know, from the White House on down to try to get this worked out and get this funded and get this fixed, because it's critical to the economy of Haywood County and Western North Carolina. And you know, and you know, your presentation has given me a lot more hope than I had thought I would have right now. So, but it's so critical to our area to get this done. And I think, and I appreciate you working with the company you are, because I think they've got the right man in there. And I just want to thank you for all your work. Okay. And really convey that to everybody that you work with. At least from the chairman of the Board of Commissioners in Haywood County, we really appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Anthony. I appreciate that. Yeah, we've got a great team. Ames and Arcane K, I told them, and you know, you couldn't have selected two better firms, contractors. We've got the right team to do this. So it you know, makes my job easy. They're actually meeting right now while I'm here, pushing this forward. So next slide, we can go to Chimney Rock. Go on to the next one there. Again, a lot of the same goals. This one here, we've got an access road in, so we're not really trying to get two-way traffic. You can get through there. I drove through there yesterday, but it's not really something we want out there to say, hey, public, let's go to Chimney Rock and see what happened. It's just there for the locals to have access to their homes and their property, for the contractors to get through this area so they can do the cleanup and the permanent repairs. Again, on this one, our goal, you know, we want to communicate and work with our stakeholders. There's a lot more stakeholders on this project than there is any other project, because you have Chimney Rock Village, Chimney Rock State Park, you've got Army Corps, you've got FEMA, you've got, you know, private properties that were between the road and the river where it used to be, that are now all kind of one big disaster site. So we've got to work out who's paying for what and who's doing what. So it takes a lot of coordination on this project. Next slide, Tristan. So here's the location of this project. It starts there in Chimney Rock, almost across from the entrance to the park, or where the entrance was, and goes all the way up into Back Cave into Henderson County, to US 64, and actually now encompasses the US 64 bridge there in Back Cave. It also has two other bridges potentially associated with it. One that, you know, they would one at Southside Drive and one at Chimney Rock State Park. There is some consideration of combining those and doing one structure. So when I say we have two bridges, it could be one, maybe two. We're still working through those details. Next slide. So again, this is a progressive design build contract, very similar to CMGC. It's just in this case, the designer and the contractor pretty much agreed to be a team when we selected them, instead of the department selecting each separately. So the designer is STV. The contractor is Wright Brothers, who's been down there since the storm occurred. The ICE, HNTB. So again, we're working through trying to get concepts and pricing done so that we can get a contract and get them started. This one is very different because of the stakeholders that we have. So we do plan on having a workshop, a public workshop, in the middle of February. One will be in Chimney Rock, one will be in the Back Cave area, so that we have both of those communities captured and communicating with them. The estimated cost on this one, somewhere around $500 million. Depends on what we have to do with the river. For the most part, we can build the road back. This is what do we do with the river. The let date on this one was November the 21st. We hadn't progressed far enough because we needed to have those workshops with the public as far as when to start. We don't know when that'll be. My expectation is sometime in that March, April timeframe. And the completion date, again, with this one, it's going to be very difficult to meet a 2-year goal. 74A, so this project and the one I'll talk about next, we have no recorded right-of-way. The department has no recorded right-of-way. It's all just maintenance prescriptive right-of-way. So we have to go in and purchase right-of-ways. We have to have easements to work and rebuild this project, and that takes time. Negotiations, appraisals, if there's condemnation, that takes time. The department, the right-of-way department, and DOT is working quickly to try to come up with some mechanisms that we can use to get temporary access that we could record so that we can go in and start working, and then letting the actual acquisition of permanent right-of-way catch up later. So that's something we're working towards. Next slide there, Kristen. You can see here some of our goals and challenges. Reception, that access, which is pretty well done for the property owners. Paving that access, that is the goal. We'll have to do that when the temperatures get up, probably in the spring, but we will pave that. Constructing it out of that 2 to 5 year storm. So again, every time we have a rain event, it doesn't wash our road away. That's what Wright Brothers is working on now. Again, building a more resilient facility, capable of withstanding that next storm is what our goal is. I mentioned we have to purchase dedicated right-of-way, so that is certainly a challenge for us. And in the stream restoration, you can see there in those pictures, the river and the road are in the same channel. They've always been in the same location. We've put it back in the same location, so let's put the stream back, the river back to where it complements the road, where we don't have these issues with minor storms or less storms than what we just had. Next slide. I mentioned the reconstructing of the bridge to the state park, and the Back Cave Bridge. Those two bridges are certainly priorities. Certainly the 64 bridge, keeping that corridor open. That's the way most of the materials and construction equipment is going to get into this area. So that's important. Reestablishing water and sewer from Chimney Rock up to the Henderson County line. That was in the road. It's no longer there. You can kind of see parts of it in that picture on your left. So that'll have to be incorporated into our project. Some of that was there, so we can do that. Other parts of it were not. It went to the Esmeralda end. They're wanting to go on up to the Henderson County line. That's a betterment. Chimney Rock Village will have to pay for that, or someone else will. If you decide to extend it on into Henderson County to Back Cave, someone will have to pay for that. That's not something the department can do. And then, as I mentioned, working with our federal partners, FEMA, Army Corps, and Federal Highways to reconstruct something back that allows redevelopment, if that's what property owners in the village chooses to do. So those are our challenges there. The next one is US 74A in Girton. Again, next slide, thanks Tristan. Same goals, so I won't repeat those. You can see here, next slide, it starts at the bridge there in Back Cave at 64 intersection and goes up to the Buncombe County line. This project is somewhat different in that it does have sites, specific sites. It wasn't all completely washed away. And so again, working with Federal Highways to rebuild back what was there to current standards. And those standards are very different than what was there. So, theoretically, you could have a road now that goes back with paved shoulders, where before, not only did you not have paved shoulders, you had very little unpaved shoulders. So trying to get back to typical in a cross section that, where this whole corridor is appropriate is going to be a challenge for us. Next slide. This one again is a CMGC contract. The designer that was selected was HDR. The contractor is Wright Brothers. Again, that's the same one on Chimney Rock. They've been in this area working. They're known in the communities. They do a great job, and it will make the coordination between those two projects hopefully go seamlessly. The estimated cost on this one is somewhere around $250 million. It was let back in November. We do plan to get started on it in March. Again, it's 18 sites, so we can get one site designed, start working on that while the other sites are in design. So that's our goal. If you're familiar with the area, you know where the signals are. That's the first place that we want to start, is to get that back to a 2-lane section. And then up there at the manual woodworkers building, there's 2 sites on both sides of it. That's the next area that we want to tackle. So that's kind of where we're starting. This one, because it is, I'll say, smaller, with these sites, we feel like we can meet that 2-year time frame. Next slide, Tristan. And the challenges, again, very similar to what we had before, building back a more resilient facility. This one, we've had damage over the years to these walls that are out there. Some of them were built by CCC, and they've withstood multiple events, but we've had to go do repairs. Jeff probably remembers some of that in Francis and Ivan. Again, we don't have dedicated right-of-way, so we're going to have to negotiate with property owners to get access beyond our maintenance limits to build this back. And then, of course, putting back a stream that complements the road, that works together with the road. And I think that is all my slides. So I'll try to go through that quick, and I apologize for that. But any questions?
I would just ask that the DOT also continue to be in good communication with the business owners and property owners down there. One of the slides, some really good family friends, I was thinking back 5 or 6 slides, it was the one with Berkshire Vineyards. And so, they now have a waterfront property that they did not have before. And from what I understand, the building itself is unstable now because the continued damage there, and they need to build a retaining wall to be able to support the rest of that structure so they don't lose that. But then DOT, I don't think, knows where the road is going to be, so I know that's been kind of an ongoing issue for them.
So, that road, you can see it kind of in that picture, that's somewhere close to where the road was.
Right.
However, the road was about 20, 25 feet higher than it is today. And yeah, so, the Berkshire Vineyards, they've had some of that building has fallen off since the event. Yeah. We have been in contact with that property owner. They own a lot of property, even up in Girton and Backstay. Yeah. They own a lot of acreage, and they're certainly been great to work with and are willing to work with us. But that's one of the challenges in Chimney Rock. This picture that you're looking at, again, you had Berkshire Vineyards on your right, and on your left, you had on-street parking and businesses, commercial establishments on your left. Well, that's all gone, and we can build back a road, and we can elevate it back up to where it was. And we can build walls or rock embankments or whatever, but if those property owners desire to build back, that's going to be hard to do,
right.
When you have a wall there.
Yes. It's definitely heartbreaking that, people's just livelihoods and their businesses that they've worked hard for.
Yeah. And so some of them may want FEMA buyouts, right? And that's certainly their decisions. We don't necessarily know that. I want to say they have to maybe October to make those decisions.
And when you say FEMA buyouts, so FEMA is participating in business recovery. I was under the impression FEMA not do anything for businesses, but it was only through the SBA.
No, I was told down here that I was in a meeting yesterday in Chimney Rock. They were meeting, or there was a process for property owners to get, compensated for the loss of their property and their structure. I don't know if it's how that deals with business.
My understanding is if it is a business, FEMA does not participate in any recovery or financial recovery at all. That it is strictly to the SBA only for villages loan.
I think they would have to sell the property. That's what FEMA would do.
FEMA would, yeah,
Purchase the property.
they could. Yesterday, they gave us 3 scenarios, and it's all based on, the cost analysis, right? What they can buy out the property for pre-storm value, something, or, you know, they can look at what it would take in the area and kind of look at it on a cost analysis basis. One of the challenges, if they buy, FEMA buys it, then we can't touch it at that point, nor can really anyone else. It can't be improved, there's no structures on it, you can't pave it for parking, you have an unimproved property. So, you know, that's certainly one of the concerns for us, is if FEMA buys this property before we're able to get right-of-ways, then we can't get right-of-ways. I'm not an expert in that, but that's what I've been told, by the experts. So, you know, it's certainly a challenge for us. And I know, you know, the department has been in contact with most all property owners to get permissions to do what they've done outside of our maintenance right-of-way prescriptive easement. But those are, you know, really non-binding and non-reportable agreements. So that's something that we're working for, get something we can report if we go out there and do what we need to do. Yeah, certainly a challenge.
I was going to just add, DOT the locals have very good things to say about DOT, which I usually don't hear a lot of on occasion. And I know Commissioner Franklin and I, and probably others, maybe my fellow board member, have been through this area. The department's doing a good job with respect to outreach. I mean, in the back cave area, they've got everybody at the table. And dealing with issues as far-ranging as how do you get your mail to, you know, what's the security sets of issues, and dealing with people that apparently do disaster
The
vacations
collaboration is
and
phenomenal and unprecedented, anything I've ever seen.
yeah. But the DOT folks are doing. I know they're not your responsibility anymore, but
no,
they really you know them all, but they really have done a good job.
I'll just echo what Chuck said. I actually was down there maybe a week after we stood on the porch of Berkshire and Irene. I called Mr. Oates and sent him a picture. That was just remarkable that I had waterfront property now.
yeah.
But also, to the point of personal privilege, my family lived just over the line in Buckingham County. That's where I grew up, and 5 members of my family, including me, were born in the little hospital in the back of the Valley Road, which means a lot to us. And I've known Brian and his family, brother especially, for a long time, and we are lucky to have Brian managing this for DOT.
It's going to be a challenge, yeah. You know, just the Garden portion, probably, you know, some of the challenges with it is we're going to be trying to build back the road where there's really very little road right now in places. But we got to build that back while people are trying to get to work, trying to get their kids to school, trying to get to the doctor's office, to their kids' ball game. And it's going to be hard to build that back. There's just very little room to do so. And again, it'll take communication. You know, that's why Mike Patton and others in the department are in the back cave, volunteer fire department every Thursday to be a presence, and that will continue. They'll continue to do so throughout this project. That's why we're having a workshop in Chimney Rock and in Back Cave, because we want all those communities, you know, have access to us, where we are, our schedules, and what we know. And I said this last week. You know, some will say, well, it's a marathon, and it certainly is. It's going to take time, but we're doing this at a sprinter's pace. So we're running a marathon at a sprinter's pace. And if you're a runner, which I won't think that I am at times, that's hard to do, you know. But the DOT and all those people, I mean, I know they're pushing exhaustion at times, but they're working as hard as they can to rebuild these facilities. So, yeah, we're very fortunate to have them.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to Division 13 and 14 updates.
Hannah, please take it away.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me okay?
Good.
So there's quite a lot of active construction going on in Buncombe and Henderson, or Buncombe and Madison, Henderson too. So I won't go over everything, but this is our progress report for all of the active construction projects in the division. Want to touch on really quickly connector update. So the O&R process did continue after the storm with a good bit less coordination with the stakeholders really due to storm response, but we did finish the O&R design process the beginning of December. There was a meeting with the city before then, or before Christmas, to kind of show where the design stood and receive concurrence on some items. We have since started the negotiation process with the contractor, and we're hoping to reach an agreement this week. So we are planning to have another meeting with the MPO stakeholders to share a more formal update sometime in the next month or so. So I just want to provide a verbal update before then. Other I-2513 projects, the AA-AB section, as a reminder, this is to replace the concrete on I-40 between I-26 and Smoky Park Highway, and it also adds that new westbound off-ramp as well as the new eastbound off to 26. I believe that project extends all the way to Pond Road on 26. So we did award that contract. The contractor anticipates starting off with some barrier wall installation in February. And then for March, it'll be a lot of tree clearing and grubbing activities. So you'll see some work out there on I-40 very soon. Wanted to touch another section of I-40 for mile marker 45 to 50. We have the ongoing rehab project. The contractor is actively replacing guardrail on the westbound stretch. And then they're returning next week to resume work on the bridges as well. So a lot of work on I-40. As well as I-26. And then we'll touch briefly on the Buncombe County widening of I-26, just to share some future traffic switches and some goals. All traffic is anticipated to be put on the eastbound alignment from the Parkway to Long Shoals within the next month or two. And then the westbound alignment is anticipated to be completed by early summer of this year. So we're also anticipating opening up I-26 to 4 lanes in both directions from Long Shoals south in the next 2 or 3 months as well, depending on coordination with the Henderson County project. So lots of shifts and opening new travel lanes coming on I-26 in the next 2 or 3 months. So just be careful as you drive through there. Conditions change, and we'll be doing some press release for that as well. Storm repairs are ongoing. I did want to touch briefly on Swannanoa River Road repairs. The repairs between Fairview Road and Azalea are complete. We are lacking finishing up some shoulder work, and then we have to do some striping of the pavement before we open it. A contractor also mobilized to the Wood Avenue South Tunnel Road Bridge last week. And then DOT maintenance forces are continuing to work between Fairview Road and Biltmore Ave on cleanup as well. I believe NC9 is the only primary route in Buncombe that I'm aware of that has major work pending still. There's a large section that washed out south of Old Fort Road that should have been paved this week, potentially next week. And then we do have a contractor continue to work on major slide areas in Buncombe County. So that's ongoing as well. But you have the reports. Happy to take any questions. Do want to say, as far as project development, there's really not any schedule changes to report from our last meeting. These dates are obviously subject to change in the draft 2026 to 35 STIP. I've heard that might be released to the public on January 29th. I thought that it was to be released at the Board of Transportation meeting in February. So I'm not quite sure logistics on that, but either way, 2 to 3 weeks probably out from the new draft STIP being released. Division 13 will hold a public information drop-in session the week of February 24th to the 28th. And then public comment period will run from January 31st through April 4th. But there'll be a lot of press releases associated with all of that as well. So stay tuned. Any questions for me?
I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask this, but is it possible to get a bit more of an in-depth discussion about the I-26 connector, the optimization refinement project, maybe next month? Just to get a bit more update?
Yeah, so we are planning to hold another meeting with the MPO to give a formal presentation. I just was wanting to give a brief verbal update of kind of where we stood in the process, but we're really close to reaching an agreement with the contractor, and I believe that we're scheduled to go to Asheville City Council in February for an update, and we're working to come to the MPO for an update either in February or March. So that is forthcoming. We do have some things to work through. We're hoping to plan another public information session where we can share the plans with the public, let the public ask questions. But obviously we want to go to the MPO before that. So yeah, that's coming in February, March, hasn't been scheduled, but there will definitely be a more formal presentation to the MPO apart from just today's update.
Hannah, can we work on having that confirmed for February, just considering that's a pretty critical milestone for the project?
Not my direct decision, but I'll definitely talk to others at Division about that.
Thank you.
14?
All right, so we can make this really brief just in the interest of time. It's the same construction projects you've been seeing for a while. Those bridges on I-40 were added kind of towards the end of last year. Some of those bridges and some projects in Henderson County were impacted by Helene, so just keep that in mind, and that's going to affect the schedule on some of those. I-26, like Hannah said, Henderson County is mostly complete, be opening to all lanes as we coordinate with opening the portion in Division 13. And let's see, the US 64 project there, Blight Street, Blight Pine, did let. We expect mobilization in March of this year. And I think that's pretty much it for construction updates. Project development side, again, same thing we've been saying for a while, and the same thing Hannah said. And I'll go a step further and say, just so that we're managing expectations, schedules will be impacted with the STIP that's coming out, so just be ready for that. We've had some conversations with the STIP office. They haven't really released a lot of information, but schedules will move.
Thank you. Okay, Transportation Planning Branch. Anyone here? Yeah.
Hello. I'm going to be very quick. I'm just going to point out there was a video in the weekly update last week that came out of the governor's office that was forwarded to everybody. I thought it was really nice, and I've been asked to point y'all to watching it. I just have two other updates. One, my group has submitted for presentation slots at both the pre-construction and NPO conferences, and we want to try to share local stories about what has happened with the hurricane and how it is impacting communities and your recovery and build back plans. And so over the next couple months, we'll be reaching out and contacting towns and counties to try to get your stories and get your voices out there. And then thirdly, we've expanded and are starting to work on more statewide resiliency planning. The RIP that was adopted a couple years ago has priority networks for NC, US, and interstate routes, and we're looking to expand that and do more county level SR route analysis. So you'll probably hear more about that in the future. And that's it for now.
Thank you, Daniel. Federal Highways, FTA.
Here, hi. I just want to give an update. I know it's a little bit late in providing my, oh yay, it's up there, my updates, but there wasn't too much that went on in December. There were a lot of awards of grants. You guys already know the raise deadline. And then as personal as for me, this is going to be my last meeting with you guys until June. I'm going to be on, if, if everything works out perfectly, I'm going to be on parental leave until mid-June. In the meantime, George Hoops will be taking over for this area. So whether it's covering the divisions in this area or the MPO in this area, he'll be covering that for me. So and he'll try to make the meetings in person, but most likely it'll be virtual. But that's what I have for you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Work committee, work group, staff updates.
I will be extremely quick because we're over time. The subcommittee reports, special studies, DA projects, those updates are in your packet. We'll send out an email with some of the follow-ups. And also there's a bike helmet initiative that's currently accepting applications. We'll send out details on that. And finally, just to note, we have been coordinating with Norfolk Southern and the NCDOT Rail Division. One thing to note, private rail is not eligible for FEMA reimbursement. And the damage to the rail is substantial. So we've been working with them on potential funding opportunities. Hopefully there will be more news on that in the future. And also just legislatively, big federal continuing resolution with lots of disaster relief. Thank your federal partners, especially Congressman Edwards and his crew that worked really, really hard on that. But that's all we've got for today.
All right. Any announcements or special updates, topics for next month?
We'll have a lot of planning updates and safety targets for next month.
Any additional public comments today? Okay, we're adjourned. We'll see you all next month. Thank you for being here.